Okay, it's 1-0. We're fucking down. 13th in the championship. The takeover happened as I said it would. People will be. Oh, when have we got Leeds? Now then, people, welcome back to the Just Joe Football Show. I hope you are all doing well and looking forward to a fantastic weekend that no doubt is going to come your way, because guess what? Leeds United cannot ruin it. Although already I'm missing the international break. If you haven't already, please pay your rent and smash a like on this video. Please do subscribe to the channel. Of course, get your comments in, and please do hit that notification bell so you don't miss a beat. I hope, as I said, you are all doing well on this Friday. Now, of course, the reason for this video this morning is a raw reaction to the Angus Kinnear interview that the Square Ball did. Oh, well, they probably didn't do it yesterday, but certainly released it yesterday, which we've all had a watch of, no doubt. An hour and 45 minutes. Great watch. I just want to qualify my own position on it. It's hard for me to watch it without my agenda, because I do have an agenda towards Angus, the previous regime. I selected this shirt specifically for the occasion because, of course, it represents the love for the man Bielsa. So it is hard for me, and that's why, I wanted to do this live so that people can give me a different opinion if they feel that I've maybe looked at it too harshly or maybe even too kindly, whichever it may be. So that's what I just wanted to qualify my position on that. Also, I just want to say big up to the Square Ball. Obviously, the link to their channel, not that they need it, but the link to the channel and the interview is in the description for anyone who's been sleeping under a rock and hasn't seen it. Great work from Dan and Michael. Just great work in general from the Square Ball lads. They're a great bunch of lads, as they would say. And it was a fantastic interview. And I'll say a few things that maybe some of us felt that they might or should have said, but it's easy with hindsight to do that, right? Like I always remember the Sam Fender song, 17 Going Under. And it talks about anger. And that's the thing with anger. It begs to stick around, right? Resentment, it wants to stick around. I'm using that as an example because I can be walking down the street totally blissfully unaware, and then all of a sudden a thought will come into my head about something that happened at one point in my life where I thought, I should have said this. I should have done that. We all do it, right? We all do it. So it's easy for me now with hindsight. And I think Michael put a tweet out something along them lines saying it's easy now. He's probably driving away, driving home, whatever, thinking, oh my God, I should have said this. So it's easy for me to sit from this position. Doing it in the moment, it's very difficult. And I thought they did a fantastic job, as always they do. Okay, so big shout out to the Square Ball. Phil Hayes done a long read article on it as well. The link to that article is in there. Now, I've made a few notes myself. As you know, it was an hour and 45 minutes. There's a lot. So I've just made a few key talking points that I wanted to discuss, and then we'll go through Phil Hayes' Athletic article as well, just in case I haven't missed anything. But yeah, please do smash a like on this video. Let's get that algorithm smashed. And please, subscribe to the channel, get your comments in, and of course, hit the notification bell. Right, okay. So first and foremost, I thought it started off, really well. They had a little bit of banter, especially when Dan mentioned the employment law thing about players or people who work for you that may not be doing the job. And obviously it was making a direct reference to Willie Gnonto, of course, and we'll chat a little bit about Willie Gnonto a little bit later on as well. But I'm just going to go through the key bits that I wanted to discuss, and then obviously we'll have a look at the article. Now, Angus Kinnear mentioned on a number of occasions throughout the interview, really, to be fair, just about how when losing, everything in the club is bad, and when you're winning, everything is good. And he mentioned under Bielsa for that specific period, which for me, I think's BS. All right, because for me as a fan, even though the times were amazing, of course it helps the situation if you're winning football matches. That's all that matters, right? That's what we're in. That's what we love Leeds United for. That's what we watch football for, right? But my point was we could all see, even at times under Bielsa, that things in terms of transfer specifically, in order to improve the squad and therefore improve Leeds United's fortunes, were he wasn't given the tools for me. And Angus said a number of things about Bielsa's tenure. And let me just say as well, if you're triggered by the name of Bielsa, then go away now. Yeah, just leave the video because you're going to be triggered. All right. Someone said to me on Twitter, "Will you just let Bielsa go?" No. Why should I? It's my choice. It's up to me. Yeah. And also, this person that's speaking, Angus, is talking about an era when Bielsa was heavily involved, right? So of course you're going to speak about the man. So to say, can you not forget him or whatever? Then no. Why would I? Okay. So if you're going to be easily triggered by that, then I would implore you to go watch something else because he's going to be mentioned a lot, right? So don't get yourself angry. Just go and enjoy yourself somewhere. Yeah. So I'm not sure I agree. Obviously, it helps when you're winning all the time. Things are gravy, and you can forgive him for the misgivings. And again, it's easy with hindsight to look back, but ultimately, for me, Bielsa wasn't given the tools needed to improve upon where he took us, which, you know, after 3 years was a 9th place finish in the Premier League. And remember, he said after 3 years, it does need rehashing. I don't think it needed rehashing to the level that Angus would have us believe during the interview, because ultimately this talk of 50 million pound players needed to improve, and that's what Bielsa's want, is damn right bullshit. I'll call bullshit. Because the facts I wanted Lewis O'Brien. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lewis O'Brien is still not worth 40 to 50 million. So I don't know where you get that notion. Basically, Radz wasn't willing to pay the 10 million that they wanted, and we all remember the ill-fated foreshore, blue love heart, yellow love heart. So all this talk of Bielsa wanted 11 brand new players, and they all needed to be 40, 50 million is just bullshit. And furthermore, when he came into the football club, none of the players were worth fecking 5 million, let alone 40 to 50 million. So where's this notion that Bielsa needed 40 to 50 million pound players? It's lies. It's lies. And the reason it's lies, because when he came in at the football club, he got a player, for example, in Calvin Phillips, who he'd like to mention as Calvin and Rafinha were 50 million. Well, they weren't when we bought him. Calvin came through, we probably would have sold him for about 500,000. So this notion that they had to be a certain price is just false and lies. And spin, but it's the least we can expect from him. So yeah, I just don't agree with that at all. Now he said all that matters is results on the pitch, and I do tend to agree with that. He mentioned about all the good things they're doing, and he mentioned the foundation. And again, I say this through my prism of like an agenda-driven. I dislike what went on at the football club. We're talking about the foundation. There was a guy at the foundation that was binned off for bullying, so it weren't that great, was it? Okay, you might be doing stuff in the communities, but the people that worked for the foundation were getting a hard time from one specific man. So let's not pretend everything's rosy. You weren't paying people that were doing work for the football club for free. Well, they weren't doing it for free. They'd have liked to have been paid, but they gave you the work because they gave favour. Oh, it's the football club. It's my football club. I love it, dearly. So let's not pretend everything except the results on the pitch were amazing, because it's just not true. Yeah. Not true at all. He said as well, I think he was asked, I think it was bookended with pre-Bielsa, post-Bielsa, and how it spiraled after Bielsa exited, and he said he didn't think it spiraled after Bielsa exited, at which point I just think you're insane, mate, because it clearly did, because we went from a 9th place finish to now in the Championship. And a lot of people will say, yeah, but Bielsa was taking us down. A lot of that is due to the fact that he wasn't given the tools. He told them after 3 years it needs rehashing. That was his 3rd season. Going into that 3rd season, he told them, he warned them. And instead you went for Jesse Marsh. So there you go. It was great as well. Like Dan mentioned, obviously, about the parameters with which Victor Orta acquired Jesse Marsh as the manager of the football club, in terms of what did you look at, and we'll touch more in depth when we go to Phil Hayes' article. But he spoke about the pressing stats and all these sort of things that I mean, it's crazy to think that he just looked at pressing numbers and said, yeah, he's the man. You couldn't get any further away from Bielsa just because they ran around a lot. I could get players to run around a lot. You know, I've heard Man United fans in the past 24 to 48 hours saying Anthony's been playing well of late. He just fucking runs around. When he's got the ball at his feet, he does nothing. The least you can expect from a professional footballer is to run around. So if the least you expect from your manager is to run around, then best believe that you're only going to go one way. And again, that's what Victor Orta's done. And the rest that allowed him to bring that, you know, there is sorry, I was just reading comments. I've lost my train of thought, but yeah, not just Victor, but those that gave him the power to make these decisions and therefore let themselves be spoon-fed this notion that Marsh was the direct replacement to Marcelo Bielsa. You couldn't be further from it. Bielsa wanted the ball, Marsh didn't want the ball. The only similarities were they fucking ran. Now, the big issue, and Dan correctly pulled him up, was how towards the end they looked unfit. And that was the one thing that they sort of pinned their hopes on, was that we have a fit squad. This guy likes them to run around a lot. It's a perfect mesh. That's it. That's the crux of what this managerial appointment was for me. We have a fit squad. They run around a lot. Bam, let's mesh it together. He's more pragmatic. It wasn't, was it? Let's be realistic. It was not more pragmatic. All that happened is we went from being vulnerable vulnerable in the central space to being vulnerable on the wings. That's ultimately what happened. So instead, I remember doing actually the tactical video with John McKenzie, who's now working at T4, smashing it. Big up, John. And he said exactly that on that tactic video. If you look at it, all that we've done is gone from a system that makes us weak down the middle, which we were, you know, due to the man marking system. How many times did we see a player, I think it was Lacazette for Arsenal, draw his centre back right out just for someone to ghost in that centre? How many times did Matip or Van Dijk 1-2 on the edge of the box straight through? It was like the parting of the sea. However, at Jesse, we were that narrow that it was so there was no pragmatism in his football. It was just from narrow to wide. And genuinely, the only correlation was that they run around a lot. But then we became unfit because he didn't know how to coach. That's ultimately what happened. You know, we had Luke Ayling basically confirm that point when he said, you know, the only thing that we had really, not the only thing, that's maybe harsh and doing them a disservice, but one of the main things we had was that we would go to the nth degree. We would go to the final minute. People knew they were in a game. And ultimately, we couldn't fucking do that anymore. He somehow, the one thing that they brought him in for, running around and energy and fitness, became like worse. How do you do that? How do you do that when you bring in a guy that's going to make everything better? You somehow going to make the running stats better, or that's his wheelhouse. He then manages to make that worse. It's insane for me. Undercoached, agreed, and stressed. This is a guy that you know reduced stress apparently, but in all honesty, all he did was make the situations worse. Talking about every player as though they're the best thing since sliced bread, best trainer, best mentality, best free kick take. I mean, he called Dominic Szoboszlai fucking David Beckham the other day. You know what I mean? So this is what we're dealing with. Anyway, he then tried to qualify this as well, right? Which, by the way, I thought was hilarious and almost what I do. He went, you know, when we brought in Paul Heckingbottom, you know, and he said, oh yeah, we brought in Paul Heckingbottom and we all knew we were a good coach, but you know, the fans, oh, he's not a big enough name. Well, he's now in the Premier League. I'm like, trying to take credit for that. Like we were all wrong. Oh yeah, you were right on Paul Heckingbottom. Therefore, yeah, we forgive you now. Like it was bullshit. Try to take credit for Paul. I just don't agree. Paul Heckingbottom works at certain places. Yeah, fair enough. But don't say that, oh, yeah, well, we were right on Paul Heckingbottom anyway, because he eventually got promoted with Sheffield United. It was just a fit. Like, it's just a fit. I'm not sure I agree. You know, and then Angus made this that we'd improved under Jesse. And Michael rightly so said, you know, he's talking about fluky wins the season before. And was that a failure in management? Because to say his first season was a success, it really never was. You know, it wasn't. The football was abysmal. Yeah. Yeah, RP makes a great point. He says, then why sack Heckingbottom if you were sure? Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly. Why do that? Why do that, my man? If you knew that he was going to eventually get to the Prem, then you should have kept him in job, right? Idiotas. Yeah, so this whole notion that the first season was a success under Marsh was just not true. We survived on the final day. We nearly got beat by 9 men, by the way. Anyone who go back and watch my watch long of that game on that final day. I was spitting feathers. 9 men, 9. We nearly got beat by 9 men. Sergi Canos nearly put a dagger to the heart. He had our best player on long throws. This is the absolute like idiocy of the man, right? Just while we're on this. He put our best player on long throws because he did a competition in training to say who could throw the longest, right? So therefore, he puts our best player at right wing back and on long throws, right? We then discover after he's sacked, with like 4 games left of the season, that Weston McKennie could throw the ball nearly the full length of the fecking football pitch. Yet he never used that. That blows my mind. That a guy that said in press conference, yeah, I studied Brentford. I studied Brentford because they're the best set piece takers in Europe. You know, I like the way they do throws and you know, corners and all this sort of jazz. So that was his wheelhouse. This was something that he looked into, and I still can't fathom how you can do a competition to gain an increment gain. Okay, let's try gain an increment game. Let's work on our you know, throw-ins like Stoke used to do. This is what pissed me off at the time, and people going, yeah, but if you can get advantages, this is what I mean. People bend over backwards. They're still doing it now, trying to say, oh yeah, Angus was great in the interview. No, don't fall for that shit. It's all speak. It's all words. But fair play for him to do it. I'm not knocking him for doing that, but I still think people take everything that he said as gospel. Yeah. So this notion, you know, that you do these things to gain increments on the opposition, to then think you had a player like Weston McKennie who could throw like I've never seen, never be used. But Freddie might have only been used once, but my point is he still wasn't used. You're still trying to back that. It stopped becoming a thing as well. You know, it stopped becoming a thing. It's just wild, isn't it? It is. It's wild. To think that he was ever a success, that he wasn't. You know, and this is the ego of those that were in charge. You remember that. You remember that at the end of the season when we won at Brentford, and Victor Orta's over at the fans pointing at Marsh. This is the ego. Look what I did. I brought you him, and look, we've stayed up. 16 years, no Premier League without me. That's what that was as well, pointing at Marsh. I bet the fans in the ground thought, what the fuck are you doing? Move. Anyway, Dan Moylan asked about Unai Emery, which I thought was great, because Angus came on with this tripe that 50% of the time managers don't work when you bring them in a relegation battle. 50% of the time. A flip of a coin, he called it. Flip of a coin. Which is just not true. It's just not true. I mean, maybe the stats back it up, but the eye test tells me if you go and get the right man to take over, then it won't happen. And Dan Moylan made a fantastic example by using Unai Emery. Because now look at Villa. Look at Aston Villa. I'm envious of Aston Villa. I'm envious of Brentford. I'm envious of Brighton. And I mean, it's almost like when people go, this is United. But we're Leeds United. Had they have managed this correctly, we'd be up there. We'd be up there. I genuinely believe that fact. But to say it's a flip of a coin for me is insulting. It's laughable. Because had you have got Emery, they said they couldn't afford him, but had you have got Emery, then we won't be in, it'd be a totally, I don't think it's as easy as to say it's a flip of a coin. And Dan was right to say, well, you say that, but, what about Unai Emery? Look at Eddie Howe at Newcastle. Yeah, true. Yeah, and also Dan made the point of saying, well, it's not a flip of the coin if you give him the international break. If you remember, we had the international break because of the World Cup and all that sort of stuff. That was a perfect time to bring in someone to work with the squad. But they chose not to do that because they listened to Victor, ultimately. I tell you what's really funny as well. Like, Jesse Marsh struggled to pull together a bloody backroom team. I thought that a lot. I assumed anyway, and wrongly by the sound of it, that he wasn't backed in terms of the people that he could bring in. Sounded like Jesse was trying to get together his backroom team, and ultimately, for whatever reason, they couldn't do it. Now, it makes me wonder if I've worked with this clown before. I'm not having it. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but I found it really strange that he struggled to pull together a backroom team. I did find that really strange. And Angus said that it was harder for him to get the men he wanted. And when you actually sit back and deep that, you have to think about it and say, it's the Premier League. It's Leeds United in the Premier League. What's difficult? What's difficult? It's clearly BS because no disrespect. Managers, players, agents, whoever, scouts will bend over backwards to move to the Premier League. Angus, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, made a point about how players were willing to crawl over hot coals to leave Leeds United to make sure they're playing in the Premier League, regardless of the team they're playing for. We have to accept that fact. But the fact that Jesse wasn't able to convince people to come to Leeds United in the Premier League is wild. Remember, we had a full off season. We had a full off season. This wasn't, he literally had a full pre-season to bring together his backroom team. And he was still employing backroom staff members a week before he fucking was sacked. So he, like Gabe just said a second ago, he overestimated his ability to bring people in. And I would argue the Victor, etc., overestimated him because he could fucking run around. And it sounds to me like they've learned lessons from that. Angus has it anyway. But listen, remember, and again, when he talks about learning lessons, Angus isn't the one making these decisions. So who else is he alluding to learning lessons? He's alluding to the 49ers. And he touched on earlier on about the contract situation, which the 49ers were aware of. Okay? So I will accept apologies via the post, via email, on Twitter, in the YouTube comments, if you like. Because they take abuse. Well, I was right. Okay, they're signing on the dotted line, but everyone knew the situation. And everyone was party to it, and everyone was okay with it. But it is positive to hear they've learnt lessons, because one of the main driving forces when acquiring a new manager was to say they have to have their backroom team. They had it with Bielsa. And a lot of this is like, they thought they were the smartest people in the room. It's all ego. We don't need all that tribe. Let's bring in this guy who speaks so well. Let him get his people. Oh, he can't get the people. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. Because it's Jesse. Paul says, seems you simply dislike Angus. I qualified right at the state of the video that it's hard for me to be objective in this. I will say that. And if you can give me a counter narrative to what I'm saying, I'm more than willing to take it on board. More than willing to take it on board. 49ers seem to rate him, at least for continuity's sake. They may well do. Doesn't mean that I have to. And as I say, the 49ers were also in situ with said Angus Kinnear while all this shit show was going on as well. Yeah? Of course. But if you have a counter narrative or something else you want to you want to put forward. But this is what I would say to you, Paul, and to a lot of people that replied to me on Twitter, is I also feel that sometimes you need to see it through your own eyes and maybe not see it through the spoonful of sugar that he's feeding you. Because that's how I see it. But again, I did qualify right at the start of this video that I'm looking at it through my eyes, which is difficult for me to be objective because I'm not keen. Anyway, so Jesse struggled to pull the backroom team together. Harder to get the men he wanted. And again, I'll come back to it. This is the Premier League. This is Leeds United. As Angus said, players will bend over backwards to get to the Premier League, as will managers and backroom staff. This is the Premier League. Okay, so touched a lot on looking at data. And again, this is something else they've learned for me. Because they said moving forward, and again, this comes back to the point that the 49ers were heavily involved because they said we've learned moving forward that any coach has to come from the Europe's top 5 leagues. They need to have been here, they need to have been there. And he spoke about player recruitment and all that sort of stuff. And and if you look at the player recruitment, they've all played at a decent level. They have all played at a decent level and have experience, and there's quite a lot of home-based players. They weren't going to dip from Austria again. They weren't going to do that. You know, so it's clear that they have learnt the lessons. So no more duds from leagues that, unfortunately, if you're Austrian, you support a team in that league, I apologise, but ultimately it's nowhere near close to the level of the Championship, let alone the Premier League. Yeah? So that's another good thing that they have learnt from this whole process. Yeah, definitely. He spoke about the Brighton model as well, and he mentioned this a lot. And he tried to... Everyone's talking about the Brighton model. Everyone's talking about the Brentford model. But, you know, we were all talking about the Leicester model before. All right, okay. Well, if you know, it was your gaffer that actually mentioned the Leicester model to us. It was Radz that mentioned that. So let's not just throw that model in the bin. We were talking about the Leicester model and now everyone's talking about this model. What? Paul says, I'm willing to give them a chance now. So am I, Paul. So am I. Doesn't mean I can't be critical of what came before and give my thoughts on it. I do. Listen, throughout the transfer window, I went on a mad journey with this whole ownership. By the end of the window, I'm totally fine with them. 100%. I'll never be fully trusting because they were in situ when the previous regime was. But I'm very appreciative of what they've done in terms of the transfer acquisitions, the manager they've brought us. They've just, the way that they turn it around for me is when he needs that extra push, like we did with Bielsa, that he's given it. And they told us that Daniel Farke in the Premier League previously wasn't given the tools. We're going to give him the tools. And when they start to give him the tools, and we start to progress as a football club, even if it's slower than it was under the previous regime, I don't care. And at that point, I can say, do you know what? Yes. But it's still early days. It's still early days. Oh. Anyway. So Brighton model, yeah, it's cool. Anyway. And then I think Michael mentioned about pre and post Bielsa and how without him, nothing worked. Without him, nothing worked. Which is true, right? I mean, 14 Yorks, yeah, okay. Fact check, he didn't use him, but ultimately, because I feel like I have you want a response to that question. Even still, throughout that season, we didn't see anyone use that sort of stuff. I guess my point is, it was just a bullshit scattergun approach to management that was never going to work, and it should have been rectified in the bloody in between seasons, let alone in January. It was just a clusterfuck from top to bottom. Because, like you say, even if you only had McKennie for one game, why even buy McKennie if you're on the cusp of getting rid of Jesse anyway? It's a clusterfuck from top to bottom. But I'll never see anything good in that manager because I think he was absolutely terrible and he ripped up what was a great time. It's not all on him, of course, but I just think had they have got someone that had a similar playing style that we were told, I don't think we'd have got relegated, people. I don't think we'd have got relegated if they'd have kept Bielsa, and I'll still die on that hill till I'm actually in the ground. I will still stand by that point. But had they have got someone who was actually similar, then the transition wouldn't have been as bad, and we would have still been fit, and we'd have still known how to pass the fucking football, and still known how to keep possession of the football. So I do hold a lot of grudge towards that man. And I know it's not his fault he was given a job that he was ultimately not suited for, but it just pisses. And look, and the reason it pisses me off even more so as well, because he said loads of horrible things, really, about the previous regime, about the previous manager. Oh, they did overtrain. I just thought, how dare you? How dare you? That's what it's like for me, genuinely. I felt that deeply towards Bielsa. Like Will Smith, he said, get your wife's name out of my mouth. Whenever he used to speak of him, it used to make me angry. It used to make me angry. And it still does now, because I still, even after even Angus, it brings it all back. And I go, wow, my God, we really did mess up. And this is where I'm going to, again, I was like, as I'm listening to it, I'm like, what? So he spoke about, Michael asked him a question about pre and post Bielsa and how everything after Bielsa went looked like everything before Bielsa came. Basically shit, right? And then Angus Kinnear tried to throw out, like anything, like Manchester United, Alex Ferguson, and he spoke about Arsenal and Arsene Wenger, and I'm on a bit, hang on a minute. These were dynasties. They'd been at their football clubs for decades. So imagine, try and sit back and think, hang on a minute, this guy's had such a profound effect on this football club in 3 years. Had we give him the tools, which I do not agree with that they didn't have the money for and all this sort of stuff. And please don't believe this whole thing of they wanted 40, 50 million pound players. How long did we all get told that he didn't want players? Now Angus is telling us he wanted all new players. Which one is it, boss? Did he want them? Didn't he want them? So please tell me which. He was offered players, he didn't want them. Okay, well, we know for facts that he wanted Lewis O'Brien, and he was 10 million, not 50. So last season, you're telling us he never wanted players. You even wheeled out Eddie Gray. On TalkSport after he'd been sacked, saying he never wanted players. All right, okay, so you did all that, but now you're telling us he did want players. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, you're talking about dynasties there when you talk about Arsene Wenger and you talk about Alex Ferguson. You're talking about dynasties, decades, yeah. And look what he did in 3 years. So I don't think it's fair to make that comparison, because for me, he was only here 3 years. Also, like, if you'd have actually gave him the tools, then you could be sat on that. You could be sat on something as big as that. This guy is that good and had that much of an impact at Leeds United that had you have given him the players, then we won't be in this situation now. I remember people getting mocked for saying I'd rather get relegated with Bielsa than stay in the division. I didn't agree with that because I want to be in the Premier League. Facts. Obviously, I don't think he'd. But then but even now, I think now and said they were right. They were fecking right. Probably would have done as good to go down that previous season and come back in. But anyway, it is what it is. We'll never know, will we? But their dynasties, they were given tools and time. So maybe if he'd backed Marcelo Bielsa, then we wouldn't be in this mess anyway. Basically, for me, they couldn't handle that Marcelo Bielsa was the guy. They couldn't handle that Marcelo Bielsa was the guy. And at this point, like when it all went, they might as well have just let Victor Orta be the manager. Because that's what it was all about. He's getting all the praise here. It's not all on him. Who can forget after he went, yeah, you had Victor Orta doing this to Marsh. This is me. Look what I did. I brought this guy. We then had Radz doing an interview on The Athletic. We had Jesse Marsh while we were in a relegation battle talking about how this club was going to be one of the best academies in Europe and we're going to get Champions League and all that. These are things that he actually came out of his mouth, by the way. It's insane. They might as well have just give it Victor Orta. Genuinely. Back me or replace me. This is what he told them as well. Back me or replace me. This was Marcelo Bielsa. So again, thought he didn't want players. You told us he didn't want players. But now you're saying he said, back me or replace me. You chose the wrong option. You replaced him. You know? Neither, well, you know, it talked about needing to replace the whole squad. Yeah? Needing to replace the whole squad. All you had to do was make increment gains. All you had to do was do it over time. All you had to do was do it over time. But instead, you never backed him. Oh, here we go. Look, here we go. He actually said that Radz wasn't rich enough to replace the whole team, which was what Bielsa said they needed to do. Okay, so do you believe that? Do you believe that Bielsa said we needed a whole new 11 players? Along with the notion that you were told last year that he didn't want players. And now you're finding out he did want players, but he wanted the whole squad. You know, he wanted 40 to 50 million pound players. Yet we know he wanted Lewis O'Brien, who was 10 million. Which one was it, Pellegrino? Which one is it? Or are you just going to take that spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down? I don't know. But yeah. So you can't tell me that you couldn't have made increment gains and done it over time. Yeah. Because if you, to be honest, I pulled up transfer market just to see what, you know, I wanted to see what sort of business had been done under him, you know, with these little increment gains. Now, at the end of the day, and I'll remember this comment like it was yesterday. I think it was the Square Ball interview before, and this is why, again, folks, do not believe what's being said, because as Vicento has just told us, Bielsa wanted the whole squad replacing, right? I remember an interview. Remember, we got promoted. We got Rodrigo, Diego Llorente, Rafinha, Robin Koch, Joe Gelhardt, and that's it, right? When we got promoted, looking at it here. Now, we finished 9th, and the following season, we brought in Dan James, Junior Firpo. That is it. Don't count Chris Clarkson and Lewis Bate. So after finishing 9th, we brought in 2 players, right? Dan James and Junior Firpo. Could have done more. Let's not beat around the bush here. You could have done more, them increment gains to help with the overhaul of squad. But I remember Angus Kinnear doing an interview saying the reason we didn't do as much is because last season, a lot of the players were injured. And he spoke about Robin Koch and Llorente, etc. So we genuinely feel this season, with them not being injured, that there'll be like new signings. Again, rhetoric, spin. Ultimately, they bought 2 players after finishing 9th and expected to do what exactly? Expected to do what? But they were telling us that they needed, you know, he needed 11 players. Believe me when I say Bielsa is a man of principles, yeah? Bielsa is a man of principles. Had he have said, I need 11 players at 40 to 50 million, and they bring him 2 in Junior Firpo and Dan James, he walks. There's no way he sticks around. He's done it many times. Many times. So after giving Bielsa 2 players, yeah, after Bielsa giving 2 players, the next season they gave Jesse Marsh, Brendan Aronson, Sinistera, Adams, Rasmus, Volber, Rocker, Nonto, McKennie. Which horse did they back? They backed the wrong horse. That's what happened. They backed the wrong horse. So everyone to sit here and agree and believe the words that come out of the mouth of, oh, yeah, he wanted to replace the old team and we couldn't afford to do it. I say it's BS. I say it's lies. Okay? That's my thought process. Now, you don't have to believe it, but it is what it is. Yeah, he did it at Marseille. He also did it at Lazio. I think at Lazio, he was there for about 30 days because he was told he was getting XYZ. And guess what? He didn't get XYZ, so he said, I leave. So if you want to believe that, then, you know, then that's okay. That is okay. That's entirely up to you. Okay, so yeah, if you look at the transfers, they didn't back him to within any level. You know, as I've said before, you For me, Bielsa wouldn't compromise on his principles, and he said that. This is what he actually said. So Angus said we had a manager who wouldn't compromise on his principles and spoke about the style of play. And he said fans would all be watching like, oh, he's knocking it around at the back and we're going to lose. So if he won't compromise on his principles, then why, when you refuse to give him £50 million players, did he stay? And again, I'll call cap on that because Lewis O'Brien was 10 million and Leeds United didn't buy him because we got the ill-fated Forshaw yellow heart, blue heart. That's what we got. Where's our new midfielder? Forshaw is your new midfielder. Basically, the club didn't want to spend money. Also, he mentioned, I think I've already said this about KP and Rafinha being 50 million pound players. Rafinha was 17 and Calvin came through the academy and was turned into that by Bielsa. So this whole notion that Marcelo Bielsa needed 40 to 50 million pound players is incorrect because you could turn water into wine. Because we've seen it. We've seen it with our very own eyes. We've seen players that were not going anywhere that we'd have gone can be sold. Stuart Dallas, Ethan's just put in the chat. I remember Stuart Dallas coming in from Brentford under Uwe Rosley. He was a winger that could not take on a man. I was sick to back teeth of us having wingers that just weren't your normal wingers who could beat men with tricks and then. That's why we all got excited over Sacco and Bataka and all this sort of stuff. He turned Dallas from this winger that went nowhere into a fucking good, industrious midfielder. He turned Calvin to someone who we'd have all sold into, at the time, one of, if not the best number 6 from England. Right? He did that. They weren't 40 to 50 million. So please, like, I don't know. Anyway, I just don't believe the word. He will have said you need to replace me or replace the squad. And I'm not saying that Bielsa would have wanted 11 new players, but you could have made increment gains. As I said, you got promoted, you did all right, you finished 9th, you then brought James and Firpo. Then in the January, you did nothing. Nothing, by the way. In January, they did nothing and told us Adam Forshaw. So there you go. And he said Radz didn't want to sell towards the end. And I mean, he leveraged the ground. He had nowhere to go, didn't he? And I said that before. I had the feeling that he didn't want to sell. Did sort of get that feeling. Barney says, new day, new dawn. Go up, spend big, never look back. Yeah. No, I agree, Barney, but we have to chat about it, don't we? Yeah, so he then got into money and how needing, like, Brighton model, and he spoke about, Brighton needing to spend 400 million, to get 17th, 16th, 18th, and all this sort of stuff. But again, Dan on the money said, well, what about Brentford? They don't spend anywhere close to, they don't spend anywhere close to that. And he sort of went down this model of their data analysts and, they have a specific model and they're all great at gambling. And I'm like, what are we on about here? Like Tony Bloom, obviously poker player, whatever, earned his money. What are you saying? We just need someone who's good at gambling to be in charge. That's what it felt like to me. And I know that might seem a little bit too dumbed down, but that's what it sounded like he was saying. Just get someone who can win a few accumulators and get them in charge. We'll be all right. I don't know. He mentioned the data analyst being to a poor standard. I mean, let's be honest, the other day, Victor Orta did an interview about signing in Sevilla, saying we've watched YouTube videos. So this is what we were dealing with. But yeah, I felt guilty to lapping up this whole chat that I had all these Panini sticker books back in the day, and I just love football and that. I just watch YouTube, pal, by it sounds of it. But anyway, we move. Yeah, so it just sounded like, yeah, we just need more people who are good at gambling. So if you win a few accumulators, get your Centre Football Club, you might be all right. Yeah, Michael mentioned about obviously the USP of the club at the time, and again, when your words are on YouTube or whatever or in podcasts, he did say that we were able to sell the notion of coming to Leeds United and then being able to better your career like Rafinha as a unique selling point. He's on record as saying that, and he said like. You also mentioned the personality of the players. You mentioned the personality of the players, and how you only wanted a certain player profile and had certain attributes and attitudes mainly. And it was just all wrong, because this thing that you said to the players, you could come here and better your career, that meant that they seen Leeds United as a stepping stone. And ultimately, that's what we was. Because the personalities that you were so big on as well, we turned down Ben Rama because of his look at my haircut video or whatever. Ben Rama's still playing for a team in the Europa Conference League, has a Europa Conference League winners medal. Ollie Watkins is getting England call-ups and playing in the Europa Conference League this season after finishing 7th in the Premier League. Our players are no longer here because they were sold this dream, and they all had better attitudes. They were all like rats leaving a sinking ship as soon as we went down. So whatever model, notion you had, you were all wrong. And the only man that was right was Marcelo Bielsa. And you failed to back him, even though he told you need to back me. Even though the fans told you need to back me. You thought you knew better. And you didn't. And you don't. And you never will. And this is the facts. This is the facts. Yeah, anyway. He was quite surprised, he said, how vehemently that players didn't want to play in this league. Yeah. And again, I mentioned it throughout the transfer window, this notion that they felt players would rather stay at Leeds United than go and get more money in the Premier League. I thought it was delusional. He was quite surprised at that. He mentioned that they turned down offers for Ilian Meslier because he was asked about the finances of the situation. Are we skint like some people assumed at some point, which it wasn't, because, he mentioned Meslier. Apparently, we turned down an offer of mid 20 million, so let's say 25 million. Strout low teens could have been like 12, 13 million. So they turned down offers for players that they didn't think were viable. He mentioned the salary savings from the loans. The reason that the loans were preferred rather than permanent to some of the players is because it helps with the PNS, the profit and sustainability that we believed. He said they've actually saved 40 million. They've actually saved 40 million in money through doing that. So, I'm not saying the loan clause was good, but that's why they pushed the loan, I think, more so. He mentioned Rodrigo as well as one of the reasons why we didn't stay up. Obviously, Rodrigo getting injured. Please go back and watch that video. How many USMNT accounts and how many Jesse apologists tried to defend that decision? Tried to defend the decision that Rodrigo should have come on for about 10 minutes in a game. We're winning 3-0. Our top scorer, because he wanted to see him and Bamford together, and Bamford only played 7 minutes. Oh, fuck. Crazy, man. It is crazy. But yeah, it just made me laugh, that. Anyway, clearly, from what he was saying, it sounded like the reason we waited on Pirro, they clearly wanted Cameron Archer. We wanted Cameron Archer, but ultimately he wanted the Prem. He spoke at length about how Archer, long term might rule that decision because Sheffield United probably won't stay in the Premier League as long as Leeds if they were to get back up, etc. And you can never say never, but yeah, it was clear they wanted Cameron Archer, and obviously they went for Pirro after that. Yeah, it is news, my broski. He mentioned how he was surprised at someone choosing Everton over staying at Leeds, obviously alluding to Jack Harrison. Everton are in a shit show, and that might be a decision that he comes to regret, but I understand as a fan, and maybe I'm getting older now, it's the law of the Premier League every day of the week for any player. They're not bothered. It sounded like Harrison was still wanted by Farker as well. They were disappointed by that. I think he mentioned 2 or 3 players that they were disappointed by. And I think they were Harrison, Cini and Voba by the sounds of it. The rest they were happy to lose, but they wanted 2 or 3 to stay. And I think that was Harrison, Cini, Voba from what you read and what we've heard. He was asked about the loan clauses as well. And who was responsible for that. And he said it was a board decision. Everyone knew. He said definitely the majority shareholder had the main say, but the 49ers absolutely had visibility of it and knew about them. he was asked about Sinisterra and Adams. Would you want them back? And the way that he put his tongue in his cheek, like he was fuming. I think by all accounts, both of them tried to take us down the legal route. It's our own fault. I don't like the players. I can't really blame them for wanting to get out of the football club, and it's the club's fault for putting them in a position where they're able to leverage law and say, we're going to sue you, or whatever it was. You know, it's the club's fault for putting yourself in that situation ultimately. They have no one to blame but themselves. Do I think they're snakes? Yes. But shouldn't be in that position. He tried, I'm not sure I agree with this, people, but he tried to say that Jadon Anthony was a target all along. I don't believe him. He's going to say that now. He said they tried to push Paintsil. I think that was the main one. Jadon Anthony just became available because Bournemouth put in a bit. I'm not having that he was a target. And then they looked at Jadon and then realised he was playing all these games and didn't bother. If you really wanted him, you'd have offered up Cine in a swap deal. Why did you wait for them to come to you? If you wanted Anthony as your man, don't pull the wool over his eyes. It's bullshit. So yeah, Adam's seen illegal actions. He also tried to defend Willie. And I think a lot of that's due to the fact he's still at the football club. And he said, yeah, he came and, after we told him no, he got his head that. No, he did it 3 times. Again, he did it 3 times. Said, he took bad advice, but it was resolved quickly. Was it? Because he refused to get on the coach at Birmingham. And then he put in a written transfer request on the evening of the game. Don't tell me he came and said, I want to leave, and you went no, and that was it. Because that's not true. Because he was asked to train with someone else. He refused to get on the team coach and then put in a transfer request. So you're lying. If that's him getting his head down and dealing with it good, then bloody hell. I just want to speak on the Adams thing as well, because it was all good PR from Adams. We all gassed up Adams, good footballer. We were all buzzing with him. But I know someone that was at the ground and told me that, when Adams was talking to Gray, we all remember that image and everyone's going, my captain. Do you remember them? My captain, my manager. Do you remember them? Big up Liam, by the way, Liam Coops. The camera wasn't on him. And then when the camera panned to him, he quickly put his arm around him. It's all gush and bullshit. That's what it is. It's all PR. But yeah, I'm not agreeing either. It's easy to back up Willie now, but to say that it was all dealt with really quick and that. Do you know one funny I thought was really funny as well? These people that are calling him a Tory twat in the street. I dislike what he's done at the football club. As I said, I've said on multiple occasions, I've met him in person. He's actually a nice guy, but in terms of, I'm looking at it through the prism of my football club and the job he's done there. He's actually a nice guy. I don't think I could shout something at them in the street. I probably wouldn't shake their hands or whatever now, but I don't. But yeah, I mean, them that are doing that, you're a Tory twat. I was howling, but he said, I'm not a Tory, which is good. He spoke about the programme notes as well. And again, he came back to that thing of, well, when we were playing well, everyone found them funny. No. Nana! Nana! As LA Knight would say. Because you gaslighted fans, you know what I mean? Because Dan mentioned as well, I thought it was great when he mentioned about the 2 international number 9s and the best young prospects and all that sort of stuff. You tried to tell us you knew better in that programme notes. It was nothing. Had we have been winning games and you said that, we'd have gone, no, you're still wrong. So we still wanted a striker. We still wanted a left back when we were winning games. Do you know what I mean? Matthew said, would you like him to come out and say Willie was a twat or should... No, I'd like him to be honest, Matthew. That's the whole point, innit? Transparency. Or just say Willie took bad advice. Don't say Willie took bad advice and we resolved it and he got his head down straight away, because we know that's wrong. Because we know that's lies. Because he wasn't even training with the first team. Like, you see it how you see it, but I just don't need to hear bullshit, because I've heard enough bullshit. Anyway, Tory twat he gets called anyway. Yeah, programme notes. So he gaslighted fans. Because then he said, it's because we weren't playing well, everything was bad. I was like, nah. he then said, "Oh, and also that was the window with which we got Willie Nonto." Like tried to say, "Oh well, look, you know, a bit like the Heckingbottom chat earlier on." The reason they got Willie Nonto, the program notes came out a couple of days before the end of the window, right? The only reason they pushed the button on Willie Nonto is because Rodrigo hurt his shoulder. Because they told us we didn't need a number 9. They weren't getting Willie Nonto till the summer. The only reason they did it is because Rodrigo hurt his shoulder. It's actually a good thing that happened. Because if he didn't, then we would have been stuck with Rodrigo, Bamford and Gelhardt and no Nonto. That's the only reason they acted in that window. So don't say, well, that was actually the window where we got Nonto. No, you were never going to do that. The situation forced itself upon you. And that's what frustrates us. You're trying to take credit for things that you don't really have credit for, in my opinion. He fluked that one, you know? And then it was like, oh, yeah, like left back. Yeah, that's easier to fix. Well, you haven't. You haven't fixed it. We're still in a situation where it's not fixed. Yeah, the Bamba Dieng stuff as well, Paul. Exactly. So don't say, oh, well, that's the window. We got Willie. She didn't even want Willie as your first choice. He was your third choice. So come on now. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, he was then mentioned about Farker as well and about how it's like, he mentioned 1, 2, 3 year. So might have to get strapped in for a plan that sees us in this division for another season yet. They were my notes. What I do want to do now is just quickly run through Phil's article if no one's had a chance to see it. I'm just going to zoom in slightly for you so you can see it, because this is like sort of put into specific pots. So we've probably touched on a lot of it. We'll try go through it. So relegation, this is what Kinnear had to say, and we'll have a chat about it as we go. Being a custodian of the club is difficult because there's only really one metric that matters, and that's results on the pitch. We can do fantastic things with the foundation. We can drive our commercial revenues, we can sell more shirts, we can do brilliant work in the academy, all of which I think we've done. But we know that we're going to be viewed through whether we won football matches. Winning 7 matches in a season is miserable for everybody, and it colours absolutely everything. That's why the mantra within the club, and particularly for this season, is football first. We've got to start by getting things right on the pitch. I don't think it spiralled out of control post Bielsa. It definitely did. But there are a couple of factors that made things really challenging. The first one is trying to replace a manager who had as much success and played as great football and connected with the fan base as Marcelo did. Lots of clubs have found moving on from somebody who's been particularly successful really difficult. This is when he mentioned Arsene Wenger, etc. But I don't think for me you can compare the situations because they had dynasties that have been there multiple years. You could have built that maybe. He says that's caused a issue on the pitch. When you speak to my counterparts in the Premier League, if you get one managerial appointment wrong, you have a very high chance of going down. Similarly, if you have had a bad win on the players you recruit don't work, you have a very high chance of going down. But both of these things coincided last year. From a supporter perspective, the sense that things were spiraling out of control was probably linked to the fact that we managed to coincide getting relegated with a fairly challenging owner transition. No, it did spiral out of control. It's nothing to do with this. It literally spiraled out of control. If we had a long-term custodian in the shape of the 49ers and maybe they'd have bought the club a year earlier, perhaps the fan base would have been more confident about the ability to return. Potentially. I see how they perceive a position where the club was without control, but I don't think we are. We are back in control and we've got a very good, strong foundation for the season. That I agree with. I don't disagree on that point, okay? I do think we now have a strong foundation with which to build upon. 91 Leeds says, who thought Big Sam was the answer? Angus. That is fact. Angus worked with him before. Sam had already spoken to Angus Kinnear prior to Grazia getting the job, because Sam has already said it. He offered up his services. And then what happened is when Grazia went wrong and Victor was sacked, he went, let's go to Big Sam. So that was Angus. Appointing and sacking Marsh. So Marsh was Leeds' choice to replace Bielsa, as we know. There were certain things, this is laughable, really, when you think about it, that Victor saw from a technical perspective when he was looking at coaches that showed there were synergies between Marsh and Bielsa. Marcelo is the definition of unique. Trying to find anybody able to deliver in the same way he did was going to be difficult. You didn't believe that at the time, though, broski. But from Jesse's pressing stats, the running stats, we thought just run around people, man. They just run around. And the key reason you brought him in was the fitness, and ultimately that fell away. There were some challenges with the man-to-man approach. We thought Jesse was going to be more pragmatic, which he wasn't. Which was he just wasn't. He worked very, very hard. He was very committed. He always said he's all in. Jesse would hold his hands up and say it didn't work. He had a very good track record as a coach, but you have to accept it failed. I still can't believe Jesse didn't take them Premier League jobs that came his way, by the way. In the run-up to Christmas, we were in a difficult position. The trajectory wasn't moving in the right direction. We had a significant dip, and it was probably the Bournemouth and Liverpool games when we thought we were moving in the right direction. But even like Michael mentioned how that Bournemouth game, we won right at the end. It wasn't as if it was convincing. I mean, what was it, 3-1 at half-time? I mean, the Liverpool game was a smash and grab. Meslier had the game of his life. So to think that that was us then going in the right direction is wild. As a fan and fandom, I got excited, just like we did after Chelsea, because that's what we do as fans. But these are people who are in charge. Should be able to see it from a different, angle. But Con, maybe, bro. Maybe, really maybe. Based on where we ended up, it was the wrong decision because we got relegated. That's what everybody was trying to avoid. It was debated a lot at the time. If we had the decision again, knowing what we know now, we probably made the change earlier, which is fine. You have to look at what type of change you can make, what type of manager you can get in, what are the chances of that manager making it better. You have to take all these things into account, but a change would have been better at that point, 100%. Kinnear, it's no secret that we were looking for somebody to save our Premier League status. It was not a long-term hire. With Jesse, someone Victor trapped for a long while. We know it was years. This is what's mad. While we thought he could manage the club for years, not just save us from relegation. Javi came in with a specific job to do. It wasn't a long-term appointment. He came in. We thought he had a good sense of what needed to change. We thought he was going to be pragmatic and get results. He did for a little bit, if you remember that result at Brighton. It started reasonably well, but by the end, the performance felt so far below the standard required that we had to get rid of him. Something happened. But Angus mentioned he'd lost the dressing room, and I don't know. He just mentioned it. And was that on Bielsa? It might have been him. I don't know, but something happened against Palace, didn't it? Something happened against Palace. By that stage, we were in miracle territory, and that's when they went to Big Sam. I don't lambast them for the decision to go to Big Sam, I genuinely don't. Iriola and Slot, he just touched on these and said, yeah, they both said they'd be up for it. They also chased Raul, which I mentioned, if you remember. We touched on it on this show and on Twitter and whatnot, and they actually told him, but he said no. These two said yeah, but then obviously Slot's club wanted to keep him. I mean, Slot didn't even go to Spurs, for example, this summer. Feyenoord wanted to keep him that much, and we know Iriola obviously ended up going to the Premier League. Talked about recruitment. I've done this to death, the whole Calvin and having to replace them, and we needed 40-50 million pound players. It's just not true. He spoke about Andrea, saying, he didn't want to leave and that, but we know about Andrea, isn't it? And obviously the future with Daniel Farker, which for me, I do think we have a manager that if we back, we'll get right. Loan clauses, we've done as well. Obviously, spoke about the loan clauses and everyone knew about them. And the reason we did them was because players, I tell you what was quite interesting though, which I liked, was the fact that they'd offered Harrison and they'd offered Adams increased contracts to try get them closer to the to what they were earning before. So they didn't just roll over and let them go. They did actually try and give them. So fair play. David says we should be looking to the future, not the past. I can't predict the future, so therefore I can't speak about it, bro. If you don't want to watch, though, just turn over. Maybe watch Quantum Leap. Do you know about Quantum Leap? You could watch Quantum Leap, Back to the Future, Mystic Meg. I don't know. You could watch something like that. Quantum Leap was really good, though. That might be good for you. Yeah, so he mentioned about the salary cut and that. Listen, we all know it's wild to think that they were gonna stay. Spoke about Adams and Cine. They both won. They're both now at Bournemouth, of course. Victor Orta, yeah, less said about him the better. But he did get praise for bringing in Alioski, Click, Harrison White, Meslier, all that. I suppose he did get some things right, and then Kinnear, but his job, of course, he's staying around for a bit, and that's that really. It was, it was okay, I guess. Again, I just think for me, it's I struggle to yeah, exactly what. Yeah, Bri, thank you, bro. Thank you. Because it's all, that's what it boils down to, innit? Obviously, there's bits in there we might not be privy to, but we've said it all. There's nothing in there where I've gone, oh, do you know what? We were wrong. Everything the fans thought, and sometimes, like in program notes, we get spoke to like we don't have a clue, or we don't need a striker. We've got this, and this. When ultimately everything that we predicted, everything that said that would happen came to pass. I'm not saying me, I mean everybody, the fan base. So I just think it's, it is what it is. You thought, let's have a look, pretty transparent. Okay, took accountability for what did he take accountability for? I don't see where you're coming from on my bullshit metering sound. Oh, come on, bro. Have you watched it? Have you listened? But again, this is what I mean. I've got to be aware that this is looking at it through my eyes, through my eyes, and I find it hard to trust them. So yeah, and it's all spinning a yarn because the key point is, and again, this tells you the different. This for me puts it into a nutshell about whether or not you can take everything that's said as gospel or not. We were initially told Bielsa never wanted players. Yeah, never wanted them. He was offered players. Eddie Gray even told us on TalkSport, if you remember. And then we were just told in this one that he wanted players. He wanted a brand new squad, 11 of them, and they all had to be 40 to 50 million. So which one is it? It's neither. You just didn't fucking back him. You thought you could do it. It always reminds me of that Andy lad who is on Full-Time Devils when he goes, you got the job on a technicality of a legend. You are a fool. You are a clown. Good night. I don't know why he turned Scottish there, but my point is like that ownership got by on the technicality of a legend is my point. And it is what it is. I think it was more Bielsa didn't want the players they were offering him, mate. There is that, yeah. I mean, when you're getting offered Harry Winks, Ross Barkley, who else was there? Donny van der Beek. You have to sit here now and say, well, do you know what? Bielsa was right. Because Van der Beek does not play anymore. Barkley's just gone to Luton. And Harry Winks is in the Championship with Leicester. So, do you see what I'm saying? So who was the right person in all this scenario? He wanted Lewis O'Brien. Yeah. That's why I don't believe this whole 40, 50 million lark, because we know they wanted Lewis O'Brien and Leeds wouldn't pay the 10 million and believe with Adam Forshaw we had enough. Adam Forshaw's broken. So, yeah. And now at Norwich, and Lewis O'Brien did become a Premier League footballer even just for a small stint. But, with Bielsa, he'd have made him into a different baller. But, yeah, we move. Listen. I've done it to death. We've done an hour and 10 minutes. The interview itself's amazing. So make sure you check it out. You can read Phil Hayes' article as well. The link to all is in the description. Please subscribe to this channel. Please help during the international breaks. It's rough. It is rough for content creators. So yeah, only got, I don't know, about 8 more days. Just a week to get through. And then normal football's back and normal service has resumed. But yeah, thank you as always for watching. Please smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, get your comments in, and of course hit that notification bell. And I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day now in the sun. Peace out, folks. Love you all. Bye-bye now.